Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to another edition of Talk Back. I'm your producer and co-host, Eric Nesbit, alongside the director of content and your main man, Justin Gay. We're hitting you with the biggest talk-worthy events in sports. In the NFL, the NFC East seems like nobody wants to win. We've got two teams that have been out of it for the whole season, but the Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles, who everybody thought would be the powerhouses, they don't seem to want to win the NFC East either. Then we've got to talk about the quarterback situation in the NFL. There is a whole handful of quarterbacks that seem to be not at their best right now, and Justin and I are going to discuss which teams have a problem, which teams might be able to move forward, and which teams are solidified going into the rest of this season. And then we move it over to the NBA. The Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James and AD are 15-2. Is that for real, or are there things on the horizon that are going to be a problem for those Lakers? We'll talk about that right here in episode 311 of Talk Back.
Well, after a pretty exciting Week 12 in the NFL, I hate to start the show on sort of a somber note, but I think we have to go there, Eric, and talk about this NFC East, a division that's dear to your heart because unfortunately, someone has to win this division, and one of these two teams, that being the Cowboys or the Eagles, Eric, are going to get a home playoff game. And after what we saw on Sunday, there may be a case to do some kind of reseeding in the NFL like they're talking with the NBA at this point. But it always seems, especially in the NFC, or normally it's the AFC South, one of these teams hover around 500 and end up getting a home division playoff game, or home game in the wild card round, I should say. And they always don't feel like they deserve it. But after what we saw in Foxborough and what we saw in Philadelphia with these two teams, Eric, I'm hard-pressed to have to talk about them as a home playoff team, but one of them is going to win this division. So let's talk about the Cowboys, because what they put on Sunday in a game in New England where everybody knew as of Tuesday or Wednesday it was going to be an ugly, sloppy, cold, northeastern weather type of game, and Dallas seemed like they had not read a weather report at all. And Jerry Jones, none too happy after the game with his team, the way they got out-coached, the way New England just whipped them, especially on special teams, and really changed this game. So, Eric, everybody has Jason Garrett's head on the chopping block. Is it that simple? Is this Cowboys team, is this a winning roster that's just simply being held back by coaching at this point?
I'd have to say yes, because Jason Garrett has been on this proverbial chopping block, the hot seat. Everyone wants to talk about him year in and year out.
It feels like for like 7 or 8 years now.
I know, right? It's like every year, oh, what are they going to do in the playoffs? Does that mean it's going to cost him his job? Is Jason Garrett going to make it? And so if you continue to kick that can down the road and have that opinion about your football coach, then when you have a season like this, which in my opinion, if you're talking about Amari Cooper, you're talking about some of the other receivers that have come up like Gallup and played well. Randall Cobb has played well in spots. You have signed Ezekiel Elliott to a huge contract. You've made Dak play out this year knowing that he wants a huge contract, and he's giving you really pretty good numbers. We'll talk about quarterbacks in a minute. But Justin, to me, this is a roster that should perform. And you saw, like you just mentioned, in the ugly weather, you've got a team like the Patriots who have only one loss on the season, and the Cowboys defense, for the most part, held the Patriots down. their offense didn't score. I mean, 3 field goals is just abominable in a game where the opponent only had 13 points. So to me, Justin, yeah, I think it's Garrett on the hot seat once again, because if this year with this roster, you can't make a deep playoff run, especially coming out of a division, as you already mentioned, where the Eagles are just down and out. I mean, a losing record after 11 games. I owe you another Tervis tumbler because I never thought that would happen. Although I think I said they would win the division by 2 games, and maybe that still happens. We just didn't see it happening like this. And so, yeah, I think Garrett is probably on the chopping block if these Cowboys can't win this division in a year where the Redskins suck, the Giants are awful, and the Eagles are completely underperforming. If you don't win this one, you're out.
It just feels like Dallas has too many games like Sunday where they just are flat, or they just seem like they're out coached or they're out schemed. And it's been that way for years. I used to talk to you and even early on in the pod and it was a little harder then because Des Bryant was towards the end of his career. But early on, there would be games where they could not get him the football. They would not target him. They would give him 0 to 1 targets through the first 2 quarters or 3 quarters, get him completely frustrated. And you look at some of the other top receivers and they're getting force fed the ball and they're keeping those guys in the game so that in the fourth quarter, they're locked in. And it's the same thing with Dallas, and it goes through it with Cooper as well. How do you not come up with a game plan? Okay, they're going to put Gilmore on Cooper. They're going to shut him down. You don't have a better game plan of getting Zeke more touches, running more screen passes for him, getting him out in the flat. If you're not going to just run him, even behind an offensive line you paid a ton of money for, and Cooper's not going to do anything, the offense isn't going to move the ball. And they just had such a screwed up game plan. Special teams, they were just a disaster on Eric. Those short kicks, it's like they hadn't planned or haven't watched Patriot film. That's something that they do quite a bit, is try to kick the ball short and make your up backs catch it. Guys that aren't used to fielding the ball. Then you add in the elements. It's a recipe for disaster for Dallas. And it's like they had no clue that it was coming. So I think I put this on the coaching. I think at this point for Jason Garrett, not only do they have to win this division, I think they've got to win at least 2 games in the playoffs to think that he can save his job. I think they have to make a trip to the NFC title game at this point. I don't think they necessarily have to win it, but they're going to have to make a better showing than they did last year for him to keep his job, because Eric, they've got so much money invested in this team now and what they're going to have to invest in Dak going forward that they don't have a very big window here. And it's going to close up very shortly where the cap is going to destroy them. And they're not going to be able to have all these names that they have all throughout this team and built in this roster. So this is why, and the NFC, Eric, is so wide open right now. Yes, you have good teams, but all of them have flaws. Maybe outside the 49ers, everybody else has flaws. And even the 49ers, it seems like they're a beatable team on the right day. So I think that's why Jerry's frustrated, because he's put all his eggs in this basket. And right now, Jason Garrett is just breaking them all. And at some point, he's going to have to do something for this team, because he's going to lose the locker room. At some point, you're going to see what you saw earlier this year. I think it's in the Jets game where he comes out doing his normal clapping and he reaches out and guys just pass him by. Like, he's not connecting with this team. And that's scary at this point, Eric, that they didn't come out with a better sense of urgency. New England probably didn't need that game nearly as much as Dallas did. Dallas had a chance to put their foot on the Eagles' throat, and they gave it up. They gave up an opportunity to really take control of this NFC East.
Yeah, to think that the Eagles are 5-6 and are only 1 game back of the Cowboys, that's pretty remarkable for the Eagles. If you're an Eagles fan like I am, at least you still feel like there's a pathway. Although I'm still pretty negative with my friends that talk to me about the Eagles. And that's partly because I'm coming off the Penn State season where once again, they just continue to let you down. And I feel like other than the Super Bowl run that the Eagles made, of course, our history as Eagles fans is that they will usually get really close or have high expectations and then let you down. And this year at 5-6, they're letting us down big time, but they're only 1 game out. Here's my thing about Dallas, and I think why Jason Garrett has to go at this point. Like you said, the money is such a huge factor. You've got Lawrence tied up for multiple millions of dollars, 100. And then you've got Ezekiel Elliott, again, tied up for millions and millions of dollars. The check is coming due on some of these other guys like Cooper and Dak. And if you're Jerry Jones, or really any of us who spend a large quantity of money on one thing or another, you expect what? Results. You want results. And so if those results are not coming, then you're going to look inward to the coaching staff. And I just think that, look, the Eagles are going to come down this same question in a minute. Carson Wentz, they've paid him a ton of money. Are they getting the results that they expected? And so for Dallas and really Carson Wentz and the Eagles, it comes down to what is the return on the investment that you made in your players? And right now, Justin, I'm with you. The return on investment for the Cowboys certainly is not there this year.
No, it hasn't been. And they just haven't shown up against good teams. If you take away what they did in the first 3 weeks of the season, this is a very mediocre, if not below average football team the way they're playing against good football teams.
Yeah.
And they're catching a little bit of a break now because they get the Bills in Dallas on that Thanksgiving week on a short week. So that should help. But that's not going to be a game. That's not going to be a cakewalk game the way that the Bills play. Then they get a Bears team that's a disaster. The Rams might be even in worse shape somehow than the Bears. And then they have that game at Philly. That's really going to decide this division because then you flip it over to what Philly has. They have to have one of the easiest schedules going forward in the league because outside that Dallas game, it's at Miami, 2 games versus the Giants and a game against Washington. So It's like I said a couple weeks ago on the podcast, these 2 games that they played, the Patriots at home, and then they got the Seattle Seahawks coming in. Yeah. They needed to probably win one of those games, but because the way that Dallas has played, it's left the door open that the Eagles have a legit shot to go 3-0 over their next 3 and go into that Dallas game where Dallas really can't slip at this point because at some point, Eric, your Eagles are going to get healthy. And that's kind of been some of it. Look, I was not a fan of Wentz getting that deal. I felt like he had a very good year. Then he got hurt. He had shown some durability issues. In my opinion, there was all this stuff swirling behind the scenes with his team with articles on him. And maybe there was some locker room fracturing going on. And some guys said no, but anytime that stuff comes out, there's something going on there. Those stories kind of still were coming out even this season. And now, Eric, he's just really struggling for this team. And then you throw in the fact that Deshaun Jackson has really been out of this lineup almost the entire year. Right. Alshon's been hurt the entire year and he hasn't looked that great when he's in there. Aguilar still can't catch anything. So he's dependent on wide receivers that most people have never heard of and 2 tight ends. And even Jordan Howard has been inactive the last few weeks. And then you're depending on Miles Sanders and you've brought back the corpse of Jay Ajayi at this point. So,
hey, I think he's going to be our best running back pretty soon.
That should tell you a little bit about what's going on with this roster. So I think it's tough at this point to try to evaluate Wentz, even as someone that's been harder on him. I do feel like they've taken a lot of his weapons away, but Eric, he still just makes a lot of bad decisions where you would think by this point in his career, he would be growing out of all these interceptions and passes that should be picked off and the fumbles. And yet week after week, game after game, they continue to happen. As an Eagles fan, that's got to drive you crazy at this point, right?
Absolutely. 100%. It drives me nuts. And a lot of the fumbles that he has are just because he's one-handing the football and really scrambling around to a point where it's easy to knock the ball out if you're a defender because he's just hanging it out there. It reminds me of like the way LaShawn McCoy used to run through the middle of the field with the ball hanging out there like that.
He still runs that way.
Well, right. When he was with the Eagles too. It's just, it's amazing how these football players just don't seem to learn. And I think he does that because in Wentz's mind, he's always just one more arm pump from actually delivering the football to someone. But right now, his receivers just cannot get separation. They can't get open. And then when he does hit them, he actually leads the league, I believe, the last I saw, which was last week. I didn't update it after this week, but Wentz's receivers lead the league in drops. So there are a number of football games that may have gone a different way here throughout the season if receivers could catch the ball. Now, with that being said, I think Wentz has been discouraging to me. I've been texting with you and other friends again about this idea that we've paid this guy a lot of money, and I was all in on it. I think talked about it last year on the pod where I was in favor of it. I thought, okay, he did have a great year. He was on an MVP type of run, had an unfortunate knee injury. Then he had his back banged up. And I thought, okay, these are just action type injuries. I don't think they're chronic at this point. He's looked pretty healthy this year. He still takes an enormous amount of hits back there, which I think is going to shorten his career ultimately. But you're right, Justin. As I watch him play, he's forcing the football into slots that aren't there, into double coverage. He's throwing it short. sometimes I wonder if it's Donovan McNabb out there because he's like